In 2023, Senate Republicans unified in the face of divided government. We passed a fiscally conservative and responsible budget historically early in the session. Notably, it did not increase Arizona's ongoing spending. Despite the governor's record-setting vetoes, we provided inflation relief for our citizens through a large tax rebate and by eliminating the tenant-paid rental tax. We funded critical infrastructure projects, protected school choice, and served as a check on executive and federal overreach.
Moving into 2024, we will remain laser-focused on easing the burden of rising costs for our citizens, while continuing to stop the dangerous California-style policies from being implemented in Arizona. We will remain unified in protecting our freedoms and constitutional rights, advocating for family values and safe communities, promoting free market principles and limited government, and stopping the radical ideologies infiltrating our way of life and undermining the opportunities we've established over the past decade for all Arizonans.
To continue our crusade to ease the financial burden of Joe Biden's reckless policies, we are introducing a plan to lower gas prices. Arizona is the only state in the nation required to use the rare blend of fuel that we do, and it's produced out of state. So when there's a supply shortage, like what we had experienced this past year, prices will spike to $5 per gallon. We will introduce legislation to provide refineries with the ability to seek other fuel blends when there is a supply shortage, mitigating the risk of such severe price hikes on Arizona drivers.
We want to ensure there are quality teachers at the front of every classroom in order to provide our kids with the best possible education. And teacher pay is an integral part of making that possible. That's why we've developed a plan to increase the salaries of our hardworking teachers. The Arizona Teachers Pay Fund will be a referendum that we'll send to the ballot for voters to approve next November, providing an average of $4,000 in pay raises. That will bring the average in the state to about $60,000 and mean an increase in starting pay as well. We'll include guardrails to ensure that the money actually gets to the wallets of our teachers and not redirected elsewhere. And we can do all this without raising taxes.
Arizona is suffering from a devastating lack of housing. This has caused prices to skyrocket. Our lack of housing supply is preventing many of Arizona's hardworking citizens from purchasing a home. Because of the economically detrimental, factually flawed, and haphazardly announced narrative created by the governor's office about Arizona's water supply, our state is now in an even more precarious position when it comes to our housing inventory, while out-of-state investment begins to impact our economy. Senate Republicans will continue to set the record straight on our water situation. Despite the governor's unwillingness to correct the water model or utilize existing tools to remedy the consequences of affordable housing, we will champion legislation that acknowledges actual water management practices for overall basin health. On rural groundwater, we will introduce an interim option for targeted basins while refuting false claims of Arizona not having existing tools to manage aquifers. Unlike the work product of the Governor's Water Policy Council, our water solutions will be grounded in the consent of the governed, the collaborative buy-in of all water users, and the common goal of preserving the health of groundwater basins for future generations.
Homelessness in Arizona is a growing crisis. While we'll seek solutions to address the lack of affordable housing contributing to this problem, we also understand that a major component to homelessness is the lack of resources available to get those living on the streets the help they need to help themselves out of this situation. We will prioritize providing our citizens with adequate treatment and prevention programs for substance use disorders, as well as increasing the capacity for psychiatric treatment at our public and private facilities. It's also imperative we ensure services provided to the homeless by community and government entities are collaborative. They should meaningfully support individuals' ability to obtain housing and achieve long-term success in maintaining housing.
Our law enforcement have reached their breaking point in dealing with the invasion of illegals at our southern border. Human smuggling, child sex trafficking, rapes, murders, and deadly fentanyl are pouring into our communities. The Biden administration is ignoring this national security crisis and endangering our Arizona communities. In the absence of the federal government doing its job, we will continue to prioritize resources for our local law enforcement, like our sheriffs, who are on the front lines keeping our citizens safe. We will continue to put pressure on our governor to deploy our Arizona National Guard to provide additional support. Doing nothing is not an option.
Senate Republicans are advancing legislation to increase transparency, to ensure safeguards for election integrity, and to promote confidence in the electorate. We're addressing underlying elections processes and procedures responsible for causing lengthy timelines and delays on the release of election results. Despite cynical partisan political ploys, we are pursuing meaningful policy and process changes so that our elections will continue to be managed by the people of Arizona without federal interference.
In spite of the governor's record vetoes of our election integrity bills, we will continue to put forth common sense solutions. We will continue to work to make our elections transparent, trackable, and publicly verifiable so that Arizona voters have confidence in the security and accuracy of our elections.
We will work to protect freedom of expression and speech on college campuses across Arizona. Institutions funded with state resources should never inhibit these fundamental constitutional rights. We want to promote an environment where students feel comfortable in exploring different ideas and beliefs and not to potentially chill their learning experience. Censorship and condemnation of conservative values will not be tolerated. We will take action to hold universities accountable for any infringement on free speech, as well as the Board of Regents for not conducting its due diligence and allowing this institutional radicalism to fester.
The rulemaking process of our state agencies is used excessively to create dramatic and sometimes detrimental changes within Arizona without the backing of the lawmakers that you elected to represent you on a variety of issues. We will work to rein in the power of unelected bureaucrats and increase legislative authority over state rulemaking and regulations.
A growing population requires a healthcare system prepared to tackle the rising number of patients seeking medical, behavioral, and long-term care services. Well, right now, we have a shortage of medical professionals in Arizona. Maintaining, attracting, and augmenting our healthcare workforce through professional training programs and identifying licensing reform opportunities is a top priority for Senate Republicans. We will also continue to advocate for your right to choose whether or not to get the COVID vaccine without any fear of retribution from your employer.
The safety and well-being of all Arizona children is a top priority for us. It's time to protect our kids from pedophiles and the heartbreaking rise in human and sex trafficking. These animals responsible for stealing the innocence of our most precious population need to be put in prison for the rest of their lives. It is the only way we can ensure criminals know our children aren't for sale.
If state government uses law enforcement power to forcibly remove children from their parents' homes because of unsafe conditions, then state government must also provide those children with a safe haven, both physically and emotionally. Otherwise, these vulnerable children may be inflicted with more harm than good. State government does a pretty good job of protecting money, automobiles, and buildings. However, we must find a way to protect children, or not even claim to have a Department of Child Safety. Children are being kidnapped, murdered, and are being forced into the sex trafficking world because of state negligence. We will hold DCS accountable and increase oversight to ensure the safety and well-being of Arizona's children.
Last session, Senate Republicans successfully fought to allocate a projected budget surplus prudently on one-time spending priorities, instead of recklessly adopting ongoing spending initiatives. Despite this, Arizona's budget is expected to have a shortfall. We'll resolve the shortfall without irresponsibly tapping into the rainy day fund or using budget gimmicks. We'll instead use sound fiscal management strategies like trimming unnecessary spending and prioritizing government's top functions in order to close the funding gap.